Their screens.
You're live.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is the Senate Transportation Committee. And it's Wednesday, March 16th, and we are going to lead off, I believe, with Smuggler's Notch, motor vehicle limitations. Is that correct? I think that's in the agenda this morning. And Anthea, you're with us this morning on this issue.
Yeah.
So what's the discussion about this one?
So we are still working our way through language that is in the T-bill, and it was introduced yesterday. So I have little copies if anyone on the committee wants, otherwise I'll just put them back.
Okay, all right.
So if we are starting with Smuggler's Notch, then you will be on, and I will have a share screen as well, because there are people that can't see that. So Jeannie, I'm going to join Zoom.
Yes, please.
And then if you give me sharing privileges. Sorry, I didn't have this queued up earlier.
This is language. This is language that the House has added, Anthea?
Yeah, so everything that you are working through now is going to be language
okay.
that is in the T-bill as
right.
introduced yesterday.
Thank you. Okay.
And Jeannie has posted the bill to your committee page, so you'll be able to find it
Okay,
there.
good.
And I'm going to put it up on my screen so that everyone can see it and we are all on the same page. Content. Okay, Senator Ingalls and Senator Rabbit, can you see what is
Yes.
scrolling?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so we are going to start with Smuggler's Notch. That is section 39 on page 47. This is part of the T-bill that originated with the Agency of Transportation. And it is addressing the portion of Route 108 that goes through Smuggler's Notch. This is in 23 BSA section 1006B. And the current prohibition is on commercial vehicle operations. So the first change, and we're going to get to this when we get down to subsection B, is striking out the word commercial on line 14, because the prohibition is going to be based on length of the vehicle and not if it is commercial or not commercial. Change you're going to see in subsection A on line 16. This is simply adding a subsection heading, no substantive change to the authority of the Agency of Transportation to close the Smuggler's Notch segment during the winter, just adding a subsection heading to assist the reader in knowing what the different parts of the section are. You will see a subsection heading added in subsection B and in subsection C as we move through the rest of the section. The addition of the subsection heading for subsection B is on line 19. And then what you see struck out in what is currently Subdivision 1 is the definition for commercial vehicle. Since the prohibition is not going to be based on types of vehicle, you don't need your definition of commercial vehicle. Instead, the prohibition is going to be on single unit motor vehicles over 40 feet in length and combination vehicles over 45 feet in length, in total length, being prohibited from operating in the Smuggler's Notch segment of Route 108. So that's a change.
Senator Madison, do you mind?
Yes. Go ahead.
So we have single unit motor defined. What does that mean?
I would need to look in 23 VSA section 4, but it is meant to be not, multiple things in combination. I think this could be changed to just vehicles over 40 feet in length, or you could probably use non-combination vehicles over 40 feet in length and combination vehicles over 45 feet in length. And I think
like they have a trailer. That there's a trailer.
yes, so that's going to be in the combination part. So they can be a little longer if it's a combination. I think you're going to hear from the agency about why they recommended these lengths.
Right.
Because I certainly do.
No, I can understand why a combination vehicle could make a tighter turn, but As long as we know what a single unit.
I will look in 23 VSA section 4 to see if it's there and if there needs to be some clarification added on the single versus combination piece.
Is there a, and I haven't been up there in a while, is there a turnaround spot for these vehicles when they can't go through? Is there a big area to turn around? I could probably have to ask the transportation folks, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Todd Sears, Deputy Bureau Chief of Operations Safety Bureau, and I have Ian DeGudis, our safety engineer, and Captain Kevin Andrews from DMV Enforcement Safety here as well. So those are the three of us. Yeah, to answer your question, there is a certain point of no return on both sides, coming up from the Smuggler side and coming up from the Stowe side, where there is no turnaround point. And so once they're past that, they're kind of at a point of no return, and they have to kind of try to make their way through the notch. And just to put this in context, and I do have the briefing deck that I sent over yesterday that I can use to talk you through this if you'd like me to, or we can just do it as a conversation this way. But I do have some graphics that I could show you on that. But
is there anything else, Anthea, you want to show us right now before we move to the?
So there's more that's being proposed to be changed in the section.
Okay, why don't we go through your section first then?
Okay, I will be done very soon. There are only a few more lines. So we've dealt with what will now be Subdivision 1, Subdivision 2. Currently in law, it is either the operator of a commercial vehicle, and this is moving away from the commercial piece, but either the operator or the operator's employer would be subject to the civil penalty. This would be saying that both are subject to the civil penalty unless they're the same person. So you could have the person who's operating the vehicle that's too long and gets stuck be subject to a civil penalty, and then also the operator's employer. And then the other substantive change is to increase the civil penalties. At present, it's $1,000 and $2,000 if there is a substantial impediment of the flow of traffic, and then it's doubled for a second or subsequent. This is increasing it to $1,500 for the first if it's not substantially impeding, $3,000 for the first if it is substantially impeding, and then maintaining the doubling. And then the changes that you see on lines 9 and 10 are just because now there could theoretically be two penalties if they're not the same person. One more substantive change is adding an exemption to the prohibition so that if you are a law enforcement, fire, emergency medical services, or search and rescue vehicle involved in training or responding to a real world incident, then this prohibition would not apply to you. Final piece for me is the subsection heading added for subsection C on line 14 for required signage, just because we have sort of three discrete things in this one section on Smuggler's Notch, adding a subsection heading for clarity. I will now take down the language, and then you will at a minimum hopefully be able to see Todd and Ian larger, and if they wanted to share something, I think Jeannie can make that possible.
Sarah Mazza.
Yes, go ahead, Senator Ingalls.
So is this banning trucks 40 and 45 feet long year round or just during certain times? Can you help me with that?
So it's year round. The Agency of Transportation at present has the authority to close Smuggler's Notch during the winter. And then this is a year round prohibition. So it is not just in winter months, for example. It could be a gorgeous day, leaf peeping season, a bus that's 43 feet long would not be able to go through Smuggler's Notch.
They already can.
Correct.
Yep.
Well, they're a commercial vehicle, so.
So two things, Senator Ingalls, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but trucks still go up there, then they get stuck and it backs up traffic. It happened just this summer. I'm curious, have we as a state worked with Google, Waze, all of the different applications out there, the vendors out there that provide the variety of the internet connected directions? What have we done as a state to make sure that GPS units aren't directing trucks to that or truly cautioning them?
That's right, because that's what we hear all the time. They're following the instructions that
Yep.
they hear. Yep.
Yep. Yes, that's a great one. Thank you for the question. Yes, we have been engaging with them. There's a certain level of frustration in dealing with some of the bigger like Apple and Google Maps, where we have had, excuse me, some success is working with TomTom and other vendors that have specific commercial vehicle modules. And we're able to black out that part for those truck drivers that are using those specific modules. The issue is that not everybody uses those. A lot of people just use their phone and they plug it into Google Maps or Apple Maps, and it just takes them that way. And when they use that, there's no mitigation that happens there. So we've enjoyed a little bit of success. And as I'll talk to you, in just a sec here, when I show you the slides, we actually had a pretty good year last year in 21. We cut down the stockages by about half, with only 5 last year as compared to an average of 9.5.
I cannot believe your GPS.
We do. we do. In fact, we have dynamic message boards up there, and I don't know what's on them right now. Well, nothing, because nobody can go up there anyway right now. But there are signs that say very, very clearly, your GPS is wrong. Do not believe your GPS. And then we provide guidance to take them on a detour, around Route 15. And so, so we do have that. But yes, we are constantly working the GPS piece. We're not the only state, frustrated by this. Other states are working on it. We're teaming with them and trying to work together to see if we can influence a more kind of deft response to these blackout requests that we have. But frankly, it's not moving very, very quickly. And I agree with the sentiment. I think that of all of the different mitigation actions that we're taking, one of which is this statute change. It would be nice to get buy-in from the big GPS companies or the big platforms to allow us to black out, but we're just not there yet. But there is a concerted effort by the state to work on that.
Well, I have a question. We obviously have fines in place now. They're not inconsequential, particularly for a driver working for a company. That actually is quite a fine, because you're going to be fining both. So the fines in and of themselves now are not working. You're suggesting by making them higher, people will respond differently than they are now. That includes the signage, that includes the warning, that I assume makes reference to the fine. I'm kind of surprised we're getting a request for a fine increase in this environment.
I can tell you that the philosophy behind everything that we're doing with the notch, of which there are many different tendrils, we understand that there is no one solution to it, and so we are trying to address it with several different initiatives. One of which is changing the statutory language and away from commercial vehicles to the size constraints that we gave you of 40 and 45 feet to increase the fines, which began in 2016. Yes, we do think that it will have some impact, especially when you're bringing in the owner piece, as combined with the owner operator language change that we have. So we think that will help, combined with a relook and a reinstallation of our sign architecture down there, combined with possible ITS or intelligent transportation system signage solutions that might help up there. We are also looking at longer term infrastructure development, which may include gateway entrances to, and we're not sure about what exactly this is going to look like yet. It's still being scoped, but gateway entrances on either side into the state park, which would have resources, people there that could intervene as these trucks came through, with agreements in place with the resort owners who we're working with right now to use certain parking lots up in those areas as turnaround points. So there are a lot of different pieces of this, one of which is the size change, another of which is the fine increase.
Since Chris is not here, I will mention that there is a fiscal note for this bill, and it has the bulk of the fiscal note is about this and looking at historically how many of these civil penalties have been issued since it was enacted in 2016. So if you want to see the history of it and how many there are per year, there's a lot of information there.
Senator Chittenden?
So one other question I have is it, do they just get stuck? And I love that word stuckages. I wonder if that's a term that they usually use. Do these stuckages only happen when it's a really nice day and a lot of hikers park along the streets? Is that when they can't get around? Like, are trucks successfully navigating it ever when there's not a lot of cars parked up in and taking in the sites?
Trucks of a certain size do not make it through. But the point is a great one. So when you're up there, when it is a nice day, you've probably been up there driving. Yeah, it is absolutely loaded. There's no sort of curbside parking there. And when that happens, you have those cars that are parked along the verge constricting the lane even more than it usually is, which hobbles the ability of these trucks to get through. Part of what we did to come up with these numbers, it wasn't just generated randomly. We did do a study up there using LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging. I have cool pictures on the presentation if we get to that, but they're basically laser guns that they shoot light out, and it's a very, very high fidelity, highly granular assessment of the terrain, to include the road, but also the vegetation and the rocks and the curvature on the road. So then what we do is we take that and we bring it into one of our engineering mobility software packages that we have at the agency. And then we model in vehicles of certain sizes, a range of different vehicles. And we look and we say, hey, this size can make it, this size can never make it. And we come up with a number. Those initial numbers that we came up with, I'm looking right now here, is the initial analysis came up with 45 feet for single body and 50 feet for combination vehicle. But what you see in statute is 40 feet single body, 45 feet combination. And the reason for that is that when we do that modeling, it's based on ideal circumstances. And that means no cars on the verge, no cars on the side. So in order to mitigate against that and just kind of play it safer, we decrease those numbers by 10% on either one of those, because we know that during the season, most of the time there is traffic. There's traffic up there. So that's where those numbers came from. It came from some fairly rigorous analysis.
Are the cars allowed to park on the side up there, or is that no parking?
No, they are.
They're not allowed?
They are allowed to park up there.
Oh. No,
I understand.
Why are they allowed to park? Why? Because of the shortage of parking, or why are they allowed to park there?
There is a shortage of parking, and I believe there is an initiative on the Smuggler side to increase parking capacity there, so that people can park and then walk up to these areas where they're sightseeing, there are trails, there are people that go bouldering up there. But right now, as of now, yes, there is. It's legal to park on the side.
Parking makes it worse, but aren't there places where, in fact, the configurations of the rocks, even if you didn't have any parking,
yes,
would still pose the same problem?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So my next question goes back to the fines. So we're raising the fines by 50%. Conceivably, in some cases, we're doubling it because we're making the operator and the owner. So that would be doubling it in some cases, well, more than doubling it. And then we would increase 2,000 to 3,000, and if it's two separate entities, that would be a $6,000 pop. Those are fairly substantial fine increases.
You know what? I agree with you, Jane. It's not going to stop the trucker one bit. If the fine was 2,000 or 3,000, they don't look at the fines cost. They assume they're going to go through it. So I agree with you. I don't think that's a deterrent. When making that
worry
decision.
about some of these drivers that don't, we're hitting the driver.
They might not speak English and not be able to read.
That's right, and that's a huge fine for an opera. I don't know. It's even as it is. So that's my concern, is the amount of increase here that would be involved.
Yes, Senator Chittenden.
So I share the concern. I don't think the fines are gonna fix this problem. And I'm gonna say this cautiously, hoping that Vermont Digger doesn't pick up on it. But is the real solution here just some sticks of dynamite and just making the road more passable? Not that we want trucks to get through, but do we need to get the boulders out of the way? Is that part of what V-Trans has looked at over the years? Is there ways to make this more navigable?
I think that our partnership with ANR comes into play here too, because they own the park up there, and it's very challenging. It's very challenging terrain. It's very challenging geometry up there. That's absolutely right. But it's also the most popular park in the state. It's absolutely gorgeous. It has that element, and so I can't say that we have really ever looked at that as a realistic solution, because I don't think it would be palatable to all stakeholders. But yeah, sure, in theory, but no, I don't. That hasn't been part of our assessment, unless there's history there, Ian or Kevin, that you know of that I don't.
I've heard the real confusion. The real confusion always comes from what they're told to do, whether they can go through or not by their phone or whatever access they have to information. I think the majority of those mistakes are made. They're assuming that they're correct when they go through it, because they see the signs and everything, but somehow their phone tells them it's safe to go through. That's what I've heard in the past, but maybe that's not a big case. But I don't think they deliberately do it not knowing that they can't make it through. I think they say, well, my GPS says I can go through, or whatever it is. They give it a shot. But I hope we can come up with a solution, because it is a problem. Every year we hear about it. It's very costly for them to get the truck unstuck. If it is stuck in the position, there are some sharp curves there, and I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think they go through because, or stop because the fine says 3,000 versus 2 or 1. Primarily, they're assuming they can do it, and they're being told to do it. They do it. But that's just what I think. Anyway, go ahead. Anybody else?
Yeah, Jeannie, do you have Mr. Sears's presentation? I didn't see it on the website.
I'm not pushing for the dynamite option, just so I don't want anybody.
Too late.
Oh, too late, you're on record.
Call him Senator Dynamite now.
I don't have anything, Senator.
Jeannie, I sent about 9:15 yesterday. But I'm happy to share my slides here.
Okay.
I think we've been through a lot of this, but it might be worthwhile to go through some of it just as a review, because I think some of the data might interest you.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to share that. And okay, do you see a lead slide there?
No. And even if we do, we should make sure that Jeannie gets it.
Your screen is not sharing right now.
It is not sharing right now. Okay. Is that sharing?
No.
Okay, sorry. Let's see.
There you go.
Oh, there.
Sorry about that. Okay, operator error. All right, we've talked through a lot of this. I guess one of the takeaways from this is two things. Well, one is that there are a lot of different initiatives going on and trying to mitigate these stockages up there. One of which is this language change. So I think it's important to understand it in the context of a lot of different initiatives. But back in July, we were asked to conduct a road safety audit review, and that's something where we go out, we engage with stakeholders, we actually go out to the site, we tour the site, we drive it, we look, and then we come back and we talk about it. And we did one of those in July. And we were directed by the chief engineer to do it. We did it, and during this, it was a 2-day event. Day one was AOT planners and engineers talking with the Smugglers Notch stakeholder group. There's a very large stakeholder group that consists of the towns of Lamoille, the RPC, the resort owners, law enforcement, ANR. And so there's a group that has already existed that is looking at the equities of the area generally. And this is one of the issues that they have been thinking about. So we combined with them and it turned out to be a pretty good day. Pretty good couple of days. We unearthed a lot of good information and had a lot of good ideas. This is the stakeholder group, just so that you can get an idea of the types of folks that were participating in this. As I said, ANR played, law enforcement. We had 2 legislators. So Representative Sherman was there and Senator Westman, who represents Lamoille. They participated in it, which was great to get those perspectives. This is an important one, I think, because it's actually a good news story. If you look over here where my cursor is, you'll see for 2021, which is the season that we just got through, we saw a decrease of about 54.5% from 2020. So that's quite significant. That's half. We had, I think, five this year, and in the past, typically they have been 9 to 11, generally, the number of stockages that we have there. So, so that's an interesting takeaway. We did do a good deal of data analysis to look at past history, interacting with our law enforcement partners and with the notch stakeholders to get as much information as we could to look at history and understand better when do they get stuck, what months, what time of day do they get stuck, and we're able to do a little bit of analysis up here. So you can see time of day analysis here, the days of the week, and then the months. And over here, generally August, September, October correlated with color season, which makes a lot of sense. But that's what we're looking at in terms of data, and that's useful because one of the other initiatives that we tried last year and we intend to do this year again is to get increased law enforcement up there to look and to interact and engage with these vehicles before they get into extremis. So no ticketing or anything, but stopping and warning and getting them to turn around. We did that last year to I think good effect, and I attribute at least some of the decrease that we saw last year to those increased law enforcement patrols. Although it's hard to attribute direct cause to why we saw that amount of that kind of decrease. This review was conducted back in July, and really, as I told this group at the beginning, there is no easy solution. A lot of themes. So the GPS was one of the first things that we talked about. And as I've said, we brought that back to the agency, and we do have folks in the agency in my bureau and others working to try to compel or make the process easier by which we can get the big GPS companies, the big map routing companies to black out smugs during the season. We came up with short-term, midterm, and long-term actions. And one of the ideas that came up, which seemed to get a lot of traction, though potentially expensive, but it seemed to get a lot of traction, was the idea of very nice, tasteful roundabouts put on either side of those up north of Smugs near their northernmost parking area, and then up near Barnes Camp on the Stowe side, which would allow a truck to turn around to see, oh, I've made a mistake, and I can then turn around and head back down the other way. So those ideas got some traction. We're in the process right now, as one of our long-term solutions is to look at how we might do that. We found some federal money to help fund a scoping study, an engineering study to look at these solutions. These solutions will include these turnarounds, these roundabouts there, but also potentially, a very tasteful kind of, you can see, let's see, an entry point. Oops. Nope. The picture's not there. An entry point, an archway that is resourced with people on either side, which is an entry point to the park that is combined with a roundabout. So you can see that would be a pretty good solution because you would have direct intervention with a vehicle.
Engineer them out. That's what you're doing, engineering them out of the road.
That was broken up. I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Basically, you're engineering the road to prevent their entering that segment.
Yes, yes. And if they get right, so if they get far enough and they interact with, a person up there, or they pass under this arch, which has a person, that person can then turn them around, and it's engineered to turn around and head back down and be able to take the detour.
Robots. Oh, yeah.
So that's where we stand right now in terms of the longer term solutions. As I said, the scoping study is happening right now. We're looking at our RFP for it. It just came in, so that should be on the streets pretty soon. But for the short term, different recommendations came out of the group. This is one of them. This is what we're talking about here today, here in yellow, and that is the statutory change. Continuing the GPS blackout work, coordinating with Smugs and Stowe, the resorts on both sides, to use their northernmost parking lots as turnaround points, and to kind of formalize that with an agreement between the agency and the resorts. That is happening right now. We are looking at and have looked at our static signs, so the digital signs that you see there, and the other permanent signs. Maybe adding more clarity about how that detour works, and on Vermont 100 to Vermont 15. So we have done that, and then down here looking at law enforcement to patrol, and we did, as I said, experiment with that last year for a couple of 3 or 4 week periods, and that seemed to be effective. So that's short term. Yes.
So you have other signs that aren't just say no tractor trailers? Because that seems, if I was a tractor trailer driver, I would just think, oh, these people just don't like tractor trailers. There's like another Woodstock kind of situation. I can still get through. The fact that they don't like tractors is my problem. I assume there's other signs that say you will get stuck if your tractor is over 40 feet.
Yes, and I'll actually push that question over to, or the comment over to Ian DeGudis, who is here with me today, because he is our state mobility engineer. Ian, do you want to comment on the sign architecture?
Well, I think you should have figured that out.
I know. Why don't I fix this?
Ian DeGudis, state traffic engineer with VTrans. So it's a good question as far as how the signs work. It's been a struggle to accurately convey this information as clearly as we hope. I think that's kind of the root of the issue here is getting the information clearly enough to drivers. We do have an extensive series of signs out there, and we've been upgrading them. I think part of the goal of this changed language is to make the restriction easier to convey on a sign. The existing language it makes sense when viewed in statutory form, but it's difficult to translate that into a message that can be put on a single sign so that a truck driver can read it and understand exactly what is prohibited and where. And so one of the goals here is really to make the language easier for us to print on a sign and convey to drivers who are approaching this area. But we do have signs, both static signs and the changeable message boards that we've worked over the years to try to more clearly convey that it's not just we don't like trucks, it's that trucks don't fit, and that this year we worked to install some signs further out on Route 100 in the I guess it's right around the Waterbury-Stowe line, and then also on Route 15 as you approach Jeffersonville. So before they've even turned onto 108, to advise them to continue on the road they're on and go around so that they avoid the issue entirely. So we're definitely we do have other signs and are continuing to work to improve that sign architecture to convey all this information as clearly as possible, while also trying to avoid sign clutter in this really scenic area that obviously lots of people come to Vermont because they want to see this beautiful area and they don't want to see too many signs. So that is an ongoing challenge in this area as well. But we do have other signs beyond just the one that was shown in that photograph, yes.
Senator Mazza?
Yes, go right ahead.
So as somebody that was stuck in traffic this past summer because a tractor trailer was stuck in the notch, I loved your data slide. I'm just curious if as we go forward, as stockages continue to occur, because I don't think what we're seeing here is going to be a solution to this recurring problem. I'd love to see more data on every time there's an incident, if we can somehow track what were the weather conditions, congestion, parked cars, did the driver have language, English as a second language? Were they out-of-state drivers? Did they have a CDL license that hasn't been achieved in a while, or it's been like a stale license? Older versus newer vehicle, or the weight of the load? I'd love to dig deeper into this so that we could be more strategic in our responses. Did they have breakfast? Were they hungry?
God.
I don't know how we would accomplish that, but some more data points on each incident would be useful.
Thank you.
Toward what end?
So that if we know they don't have breakfast, we can maybe have free breakfast.
I see. Uh-huh.
And maybe that's the idea, to say free breakfast, and then they get the breakfast, you say, like, you don't want to take that road, take this road.
That's not right. Free breakfast.
Or free breakfast for truckers. Positive.
I know there's signs miles away from it warning you before you even get to that road. We've added more signs. And I don't know what else you can do. I mean, it's unbelievable what happens there, and they just take that chance. And I just think they can get through.
I can understand. There's a beautiful stretch of road if you're coming out of Arizona to go back into Utah, and it's called the Moki Dugway, and it is absolutely straight, and there's a sign that says no trailers. And I was like, this is beautiful. This road is just straight, it's desert. And then it hit a butte that went just right up like that. And it was hairpin turn. But until you got there, you would have had no, unless you were familiar with the road, you would have no idea that that beautiful straight stretch of road was going to end up with just almost a vertical climb to get up. It was, and I could see why people would say, I would have, this is beautiful. What's that sign for? And I suspect that kind of, unless you're familiar, kicks in and you say, this looks fine to me. I think I can.
Why are you that far away from home, Senator?
The Moki Dugway? I just love that name, the Moki Dugway. But it really was hairpin turn to get you back up to the higher elevation. So
did your 51 Chevy make it that far? No.
My 23 Model T. Yeah, I know. Took quite a while to get out there. But I don't know, just sometimes human behavior is not registering what the sign is saying. And there was nothing in the maps indicate what you were encountering. So it just seems like the signage, one of these static signs isn't sufficient to overcome just what they're visualizing, what they're seeing and experiencing before they actually hit the stickage point or stuckage.
Okay, let's if we got a moment, let's switch to Captain Andrews. I believe he's with us this morning.
I am. Good morning, committee.
Good morning.
Good morning. Kevin Andrews. I'm a captain with the Enforcement and Safety Division here at DMV. And I agree. I agree with what everybody said throughout this entire conversation. I don't really have a whole lot more to add that Todd hasn't already hit on. He did a great job of laying out the issues, but just some things to, that I think we have an opportunity here to maybe not fix the issue right now, but certainly potentially improve upon things. And certain language within the existing statute, I think, does extend kind of this little bit of false hope to non-commercial vehicles that they will have no issues navigating Smuggler's Notch, or the problem of vehicles getting stuck is not exclusive to commercial to tractor trailer units. So I think broadening the language for vehicles that are prohibited to include some of these non-commercial type vehicles, or commercial vehicles that weren't initially included, such as buses, will alleviate some of the problems that we have there now, because some of these vehicles do contribute to the incidents of vehicles becoming stuck in the notch section. So I did work. I was one of the people on this group, and I do agree with Todd on the on how the acceptable vehicle lengths was determined, and obviously we're not in favor of using kind of a maximum length, because that doesn't necessarily take into account driver ability or driver experience, and so having those kind of reductions, we think will kind of alleviate some of that. The certain spot within Smuggler's Notch that Todd showed in his slide that had the rock outcroppings and stuff. I mean, we are talking about a place that a tractor trailer cannot physically make it. It doesn't matter what the ability of the driver is, due to road character and in the vehicle size, it's just impossible to make it. So in addition to kind of broadening the prohibited vehicle types, I think that will also potentially make it easier for Ian and his team to kind of portray this message on a sign, so that we're not putting it in the driver's we're not leaving it up to the driver to determine A, whether or not they are a commercial vehicle, or B, whether or not their vehicle might fit through there if they're not clearly a commercial vehicle. So I think by just prohibiting vehicles of a certain length will just make the signage easier to dictate what could possibly make it and what may not. One of the biggest things that I like to talk about in the committees when we discuss this particular issue is when one of these vehicles does get stuck, it is a huge cluster, and it brings everything to a complete standstill. And my fear has always been, given the amount of time that it generally takes to dislodge one of these vehicles, depending on how hard the driver attempted to continue to go, that is all time that prohibits emergency services from getting from one side to the other. And I think the fact that the removal of these vehicles is so difficult compounds the problem when they do get stuck. And in my opinion, that heightens our duty to try to do everything that we can to prevent those vehicles from being stuck in the first place. The GPS does seem to be the biggest reason that vehicles get stuck. And I know it's been a topic of discussion for years, on and off for years. I know we've tried, even at the law enforcement level prior to the agency becoming involved, tried to remedy some of this. And it really just, it seems to fall on deaf ears with the GPS companies. And to some extent, I do understand their position, and by and large, their position is that the GPS data that they're providing to the driver is not incorrect. The GPSs will route drivers indiscriminately because the GPS doesn't know what kind of vehicle the driver's driving. The biggest problem is that the drivers of these larger vehicles are not using the adequate GPS platform designed for the vehicle that they're using. And Todd alluded to that earlier in his presentation, where they're just not using the commercial module of that particular GPS. And that's kind of where there's this disconnect between the GPS route in these kind of large trailers, is because if a driver of a tractor trailer just uses his iPhone and punches in, point A to point B, it quite frankly is gonna, could possibly send him over the notch because the GPS just doesn't know that that vehicle won't fit. So, in order for some GPS companies to actually prevent that, they would almost have to remove Smuggler's notch from their system so that it doesn't route anybody that way. And for obvious reasons, most of them just aren't willing to accommodate that.
If I may, Chair Mazza?
Yes, go ahead.
That was exactly the other question I was going to ask. Short of dynamite, what if we just delist this as a road? I'm guessing that it's all out of staters that are getting stuck up there. Because if you're in Vermont, you know the notch, and we already close it half the year. What if we just delist this as a road so that they would be maybe legally be forced to not include it as a pass through for anybody, but all us Vermonters would still know that during the nice months of the year we can actually get through there?
Secret path.
That is an interesting question. And actually, we've received that over the years. Some drivers seem to think that if we just, I don't know what the proper term is, give up the road and just not have it as a state highway anymore. And if it's named something else, that in itself would be enough to keep truckers off of it, because they would view it just as a local road, and they would probably not use it as much.
That makes sense.
But that I don't know all the nuances of renaming a highway that is currently a state highway as something that differently. So I would have to yield to that question. But we have received that question over the years.
Senator Mazza?
Yes, go ahead.
Michelle Boomhauer has a question or a comment.
Yes, Michelle, good morning.
Thank you, Senator. Michelle Boomhauer, Vermont Agency of Transportation. I think the thing I would just bring forward as part of the current discussion is that we've invested a significant amount of federal dollars in the notch area relative to the enhancements we've made for parking and the roadway and drainage. We have a new project coming up shortly. And I don't know if there would be any payback provision that would be accompanied with those federal dollars we've already invested over the years in the notch. And then I think secondly, we certainly wouldn't be able to use federal dollars for notch maintenance and repaving, et cetera. So we want to understand what those costs would be to the state. And I think we sort of finally also don't want to discourage travel and tourism of light duty vehicles, regular cars, from finding out where this resource is. And a lot of times that's found out through a mapping type application or a roadway recognition system. So those are just a few points to consider.
I have a question about proportionality. Obviously, this gets a lot of press, but for example, Route 9, before we required chains, where the number of incidents where, and particularly tractor trailer trucks using that road that goes over the mountain, we used to have a lot of accidents. We used to have traffic tied up, etc. Are we struggling with something here with the notch that in fact is not so much different than the reality of what we did? So we put in the chain requirement over Route 9. If that chain requirement is not obeyed, and a tractor trailer attempts to go up and ties up that highway, which has happened in the past, what do the fines look like for that?
Can't hear you, Todd.
Am I muted?
No, we can hear you. We can't hear Todd.
I was muted. Sorry about
Okay,
that.
right.
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know what the fine structure is. Kevin or Ian, do you have any idea? If not, we can get back to you on that. But I understand the question of proportionality, and we can return something for you on that. Kevin, unless you know off the top of your head what that fine structure on 9 is.
Yes, it's not dissimilar to the fine structure that's currently in statute for smuggler's notch. a couple of key differences though, is that Route 9, there is nothing that would physically prevent any commercial vehicle from actually going through it. The chain up requirement just essentially is an attempt to try to prevent any vehicle from going off the road or obstructing the road. But even if a vehicle were to go up there without chains, it isn't necessarily a given that it will obstruct the road. Smuggler's Notch is we have that problem. If a certain vehicle goes up there, it is without a doubt just not going to make it. But as far as the signage goes on Route 9, I'll be quite honest with you, there's a lot less signage on Route 9 for the chain up than there is for Smuggler's Notch. Basically, there's for Route 9, there's big message boards that indicate whether or not the chain up is in effect at the current time, and then there's areas that are signed for chain up and chain down areas, which is basically the same area, but it's either chain up if it's before you go over the mountain, and if you're already coming down the mountain, then it's a chain down area. But so that's in essence, all the signs that are there, and it's by and large, if I were to just take a guess at it, because I'm not staring at statistics, but having worked Route 9 for many, many years in my earlier part of my career, I would say that the number of incidents has certainly decreased since the chains are required. The problem I feel like with Smuggler's Notch is just slightly different, and that it's really a two-pronged problem that we need to fix or try to find a solution to at least limit the incidents. And one is that certain vehicles just don't fit. So that's kind of the first part of the problem is connecting with the driver so that they understand their vehicle just physically doesn't fit. But the second part of that is drivers don't stop driving until they find a spot to turn around. So even if the driver at some point understands I can't make this, he or she still needs to find that place to be able to safely turn around. And it's been my experience with 21 years worth of experience of dealing with truck drivers is they don't want to they know that they're going to get in trouble per se if they just stop and block the road. So their object is not to do that. So they continue to drive until they find a spot that they think that they can turn around so that they go back the way they came. And that's one of the challenges with Smuggler's Notch is at some point, even if they know they can't make it, their only option is to either stop and block the road and back up, which a lot of them do, or continue to drive thinking that there may be a spot further down the road to turn around, but they get stuck before they find that spot. So I think really that's the two prongs. And I don't think that we're unsuccessful on both fronts. I just think trying to find a solution that's successful with both of those two prongs at the same time and early enough is the key to kind of alleviating this issue.
Well, we've had a good conversation this morning on this issue. It's bigger than we thought, and it's always been around naturally. So I think at this point we'll switch gears and it'll be discussed again when we get the bill. But I seem to think there can be some minor adjustments, but other than that, we're going to try to do our best to do more from the safe side. Maybe there's a fine addressing or whatever, but unless there's anything else at this time, I'd like to move on and
Can I ask one quick question about
sure, go right ahead. Yep.
Captain Andrews, on that Todd's last slide on the citation data, I just wondered why it would be that sometimes a vehicle gets stuck and doesn't get a citation, and sometimes there's more citations than vehicles getting stuck. I don't know if you've seen that slide.
There's a variety of reasons. Well, I should say a variety. There's a few reasons why. Obviously, whether or not tickets are issued is always at the discretion of the officer that responds. Sometimes the officer responds, doesn't write the ticket. Sometimes no officer responds, or the driver successfully backs himself out before law enforcement gets on scene. Sometimes the vehicle is stopped within the Smuggler's Notch area, but hasn't reached the point where it actually physically gets stuck. So they could possibly be stopped within the Smuggler's Notch portion, be given a ticket because they're where they shouldn't be. And then the officer is able to back them down and get them turned around and send them away. They're already getting stuck.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Maybe there'll come a day, there'll have to be someone on both sides of the mount to let them go through or not.
It's gonna put up some cameras.
There you go.
Closing comments, sir. When we come back to this, if there's ever been an estimation of how much every stockage costs us in emergency response, labor, time, and also lost enjoyment, I would just love a ballpark figure.
How do you?
It'd be rough, you know. But how much
Lost
time?
enjoyment. I mean, that's.
Well,
A lot depends on what you're doing in the car in the meantime. So.
the answer is about $250,000 a season. And that is definitely back of the envelope, and it is making a lot of different assumptions. But okay, so just that you know that. But the costs are law enforcement clearage costs, how long they're up there, but there is also how many cars are stuck and for how long. And then there are calculations that the civil engineers do to the tune of about $6,000 an hour for the number of cars that are usually stopped in any given kind of incident up there. So there are assumptions to be made, but it is between 2 and 250.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for coming this morning, everyone. Good discussion, and we'll continue later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Anthea, our next one is right-of-way permits, I believe.
The house is fill out.
No, house transportation.
Well, that's what I mean.
Introduced, yeah. They voted to approve it for introduction yesterday. Okay. It'll be referred to either Ways and Means or Appropriations on the floor today.
It's you appropriation chair now. We're going to have all the headaches.
Well, with fines in it, it probably will go to Ways and Means.
Yeah, that might be a matter of discussion somewhere along the line. I think you're right. I don't think they stop and say, well, it's 3,000 instead of 2,000. I think I'm going to turn around. I don't think that's a discussion at all, but that could be different. Okay, Anthea, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to put the bill back up, but if you are following along in paper, you're going to back up 2 sections to 37. This is on page 46. So this is making amendments to section 1112, which is the permit fee section for the right-of-way permit, also known as the 1111 permit. So this is when something is in the highway right-of-way, you need this permit, and then there's a schedule of fees that are applicable. So this is dealing with, in Subdivision 2, down at line 17 and 18, the $100 fee for a utility installation in the highway right-of-way, and changing it so it is having statute match what the Agency of Transportation's current practice is in 2 ways. And that is on line 17, you'll see the word each is being struck out. So if there was a utility installation that connected for that one utility installation in multiple places, they are just charging the one fee for the direct connection, not each direct connection. And then including the word subsurface on line 18, and that would be a limitation on the connection to the stormwater system. And it would just be those connections that are beneath the surface. So not like draining to like a culvert or a ditch along the highway. And then it is in the definition section for the 1112 section in subsection A, there are definitions that are applicable just for that section. And having a subsurface stormwater system, meaning a a stormwater system as defined in Title 10, and I can pull that language up if the committee wants to see it, that is beneath the surface. And this is language that the Agency of Transportation worked on in consultation with ANR after it was brought up that maybe there needed to be some more clarity as to what stormwater system they were attempting to describe. It originally in the first version was closed stormwater system, and subsurface has been settled on the more appropriate verbiage there. I will just do section 38 quickly, and then I know you're going to hear from Joe after this. Section 38 is dealing with language in Title 24. This is on the next page, page 47. If you remember last year in the T-bill, there was language that was modifying what needs to happen if there is going to be a site plan that involves access to the state highway, changing it so they needed to get a letter from the Agency of Transportation, and the application includes that letter from the agency confirming that the agency has reviewed the proposed site plan and determined whether a permit is required under 19 VSA section 1111, that right-of-way permit. And then this is the part that's being modified in this language. If the agency determines that there will need to be a right-of-way permit, then the letter under current law shall, mandatory, not permissive, so it'd be changing it from shall to may, needs to set out any conditions that the agency proposes to attach to the permit. And the concern there is, do they need to include ones that are just sort of a standard part of the 1111 permit?
Where there are no conditions attached.
Yeah, so, and are they then prevented from, if they didn't attach to the letter, then having those conditions in the future? So this is making it permissive. They don't need to attach them, but they may. And that if they are attaching conditions, it's just, you may attach conditions to that letter, setting it out what they will be, but it doesn't need to be any and all, the ones that might be applicable, the ones that are standard.
Seems like it's just write it and say no conditions. Oh, all right.
So those are the two right-of-way 1111 sections in the T-bill. These both originated with the Agency of Transportation. We'll take off my share screen. Oh, was I not sharing? Apologies.
You were.
Okay.
But let me ask, if there are conditions, then there's no requirement that they.
So this isn't the permit itself. This is the letter that needs to be included for purposes of the municipal review on the site plan. This is not changing anything about what needs to happen with the issuance of the 1111 permit. This is just sort of the Agency of Transportation through what presumably is a developer providing information back to the municipality for site plan review.
All right, but what if they, all right, they may set out any conditions. What in fact, if they do have conditions and they don't set them out?
So is your question, what would happen if they don't set it out in the letter or they don't set it out in the permit?
In the letter.
In the letter?
As a letter, it says they may set out conditions that the agency could, so they could send out a letter that doesn't set forth any conditions, but then the permit would have those conditions attached. I'm just wondering.
So this would not then preclude the conditions in the 1111 permit. This is just what needs to be included or what may be included in that part for the
You're
municipality.
saying it might be confusion if the letter doesn't say their conditions. then
That's exactly my point, Senator Furtley. You're really sharp.
So to the extent that there could be confusion created, I think that's something that the agency would probably learn. And just because it doesn't say they shall, they could continue to choose.
I understand that. I'm just saying, I would hate to have somebody surprised saying I got the, you know, the letter and there was nothing about any conditions and now I've got my permit and conditions are attached. That's what I'm concerned here.
I see what you're saying in that, and I think it would be probably helpful to hear from the agency about sort of the timing of some of this, because I do not know.
I can certainly understand where in fact a permit is just sort of pro forma and, you know, there are no conditions and that's fine. I just was concerned about why it's being changed. Because it says they shall set out any any conditions, which would mean if there are no conditions that would go with a permit, then they don't have to, then this doesn't apply. So that's I guess my question.
I can try to answer that question.
Yeah, go right ahead. Go right ahead, Joe. Go right ahead.
Good morning, Joe Segale, Director of Policy Planning and Research. And just, the whole point of this letter and this process that got put in place the last couple of years or so was to make sure that the agency was weighing in on projects that were adjacent to the state highway that were being approved at the local level, so that if we thought there needed to be any changes into like where their driveway might be located or other issues, that they were getting that feedback from us really early, so they didn't come to us later on and we're surprised. And also I should just back up a little bit. The reason we're asking for these changes is we're putting the permit application process online, and we were just going through and looking at statute and making sure everything was consistent. And so when we write these letters, and if a permit is required, we will absolutely identify the major changes that we feel are necessary in a site layout to satisfy our access guidelines. So they will have those sorts of conditions in them. What we weren't planning to do is include every single condition that are like standard conditions in our permit, like you need to leave the site clean, you need to do traffic management. And what we were concerned about was that if we write a letter, that letter then becomes confused as it's the permit, when in fact it's not. And we also want some flexibility because things can change between when a project is approved at the local level and when the application actually comes into us. So that's where this request is coming from.
Answer my question.
Questions?
No.
Go right ahead. I can't see you. Go ahead.
Well, we can talk about that language later, I guess, when we get to the bill, because it would be pretty easy to switch a little bit to make it perfectly clear that if there are conditions there are required to put in the letter. But just a quick question for it. The utility installation is defined, I'm assuming.
Let's see.
That could mean a lot of different things.
I will tell you that by going comma including connection to the highway subsurface stormwater system, that it would definitely be including that, but it might be broader than that. And I can see if 1112 has a definition of utility installation. I can tell you that there is not one sort of overarching for Title IX.
And we don't have to figure it out now, just something I've wondered.
That's current, isn't it? That's a current statute,
Yeah.
utility installations.
There are a number of definitions that are applicable just to 1112. Let's see what they are.
Michelle, any comment?
Oh, Senator Mazza, no, thank you.
Okay.
No, the only definitions are major commercial development, minor commercial development, and residential or agricultural purposes. So it would be sort of up to plain English dictionary definition. And I don't know enough about utility installations to know if there's ambiguity there.
So I assume for Joe that utility installations are telephone poles, cable poles, electric work, all that those kind of things.
Right, telecommunication.
It could also be that it's defined in the 1111 permit. I'm gonna go check there.
What would be the direct connections to your stormwater, subsurface stormwater, then utility installations? What would that be? Would that be? Well, on line 17, it says utility installations, including direct connection to the state highway subsurface stormwater system. What would those utility installations be that are connecting to your stormwater system?
The only thing that's connecting to our stormwater system is other stormwater systems, right? So it's the on-site, whatever the on-site stormwater management system is. So they might have catch basins and underground pipes that need to connect into our underground pipes and catch basins.
Yeah, you're talking about municipal connections, and well, this is all under.
It's
site plan.
It could be municipal, but it's really the adjacent, whatever the adjacent parcel is that's asking for an access permit to work on our state highway right of way. So it could be like a commercial development that has on-site stormwater management systems that need to connect into our underground systems. The distinction we're making here is we don't charge a specific fee if the drainage is just surface drainage, if it's coming off the site and it's landing in our open ditches along the roadway. This is when there's connections to our underground, any underground structures that we have, just because there's more risk when you're connecting into something that's underground. So that's why this is called out, I think, separately in the original statute. I mean, it's utilities, comma, and and then including direct connections to the state highway subsurface stormwater system.
Questions?
And Senator Perch, like I did pull up the 1111 permit, and it says utility installations include each direct connection to the state highway stormwater system. So it's just not mirroring the statute. There's not more elaboration.
So it's really utility in the word, in the definition of stormwater utility, not like electric and telecommunications.
So the way that
Because they wouldn't be connecting.
Right, but
telephone pole.
I mean, unless they had to do some stormwater around the telephone pole.
but we don't use, it doesn't say like exclusively direct stormwater system or anything like that. And we say including, we don't use in statute because there's overarching language in statute that says we don't need to, the including but not limited to. So this is not in any way limiting what a utility installation is. That it's just specifically saying, and if you were unclear, it includes this. I would look to the agency as to whether or not, for purposes of telephone poles in the right of way, they are assessing a $100 fee. There is,
but it wouldn't come under this because that's not a direct connection to the subsurface, is it?
but it's not saying, like, if it was just supposed to be direct connection to the state highway subsurface stormwater system, then you wouldn't include utility installations. You would say, two.
Yeah, okay, so it's including. It's
Right,
not
so
exclusive.
I would look to the agency in terms of what they are including in the utility installation piece.
One time I had this, I ended up getting a crown.
Yes, we do charge $100 for, installations of a utility pole or fiber or whatever else, non-stormwater related utility in our right of way.
Oh my gosh, every time they replace a telephone pole, they pay $100?
Yeah, well, they get the utilities generally will get a permit for the whole year, and they pay $100 for that permit for the whole year.
Oh,
So
not for pole.
yeah, and it's really just so that we're able to keep track of all the changes that are happening.
And the other thing I will just add here is under section 1112 for the fees, I only included subdivision 2, but subdivision 5, annual blanket permits for routine inspection and maintenance of existing utility installations within state highways. So there is a separate line.
Yeah, actually, and
That's fine.
right, that's $500, right? But so yes, if they're moving one telephone pole and that's the only thing that they're doing, or they're installing a new telephone pole, then and if they didn't have a blanket permit, it would be $100.
Okay. Any other discussion on this issue right now? Something to sleep on.
It's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Capsules in this room are snapping, that's all I can tell you. Oh.
God, I wish I'd known there was no excitement. I could have been there today, darn it.
Oh, I know, we're missing you.
Well, I know I could have been there. I didn't know we were going to have an exciting day. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. I guess that's it for this issue. And we will take a 15-minute break and we'll see you all 11 o'clock.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
That's 7:45.
Yeah, why did we get that new clock?
I bring in, wait a minute, I got my battery